TCU doesn't have a lot of big names in their wide receiver room, but Jordan Dwyer returning to TCU for another season at least gives the Frogs wide receiver one potential. Oh yeah, it's locked on Horned Frogs. Play my music.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? I, of course, am Darian the Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, host of your favorite one-stop shop for everything TCU athletics, Monday through Friday, but you know it better as the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network in the country. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 5 to 6:30 Central. We close out today's episode with a look at the two edge rushers that TCU brought into town. I think it's smart that they double up at the position. I think it was imperative, and I'll tell you why. Segment 2 is about the savings, right? Not your financial savings. We'll keep that for Rocket Money, but this is about the saving of bowl season. I believe that 2025 and 2026 have officially saved the bowl games. But one thing that could or could not be the savior of TCU's wide receiver room is Jordan Dwyer, who announced that he will be returning to Fort Worth for yet another season. This didn't come as any surprise to me. I didn't really think that he was going to leave, mostly because a lot of times you see players hit the portal early. The portal window is not a large time frame, right? So if you're going to hop in, you need to hop in pretty early on. And especially when a guy like Kendall Briles leaves in December, you have a lot of time to think about it. People's seasons are over for some weeks before the transfer portal opens. For TCU, Jordan Dwyer was announced out of the Alamo Bowl for at least a week before the game actually happened. So if he was going to enter the portal, I expected him to enter the portal early. But one thing I will say is that the fact he did stay, he announced his return, it gives TCU wide receiver one potential. TCU now has wide receiver one potential with Jordan Dwyer returning, at least from a returning player standpoint, right? So the room isn't star-studded. Let's be very clear. You don't have a bunch of studs in that room or a bunch of stars in that room. I think you have some guys who are very exciting, but you don't have a bunch of stars in that room. As far as contributors who are returning to the team, Jordan Dwyer is the guy. There's no Man Jack. There's no McAllister. It's Dwyer, right? Like, even if you go to the tight end position, it's no DJ Rogers. This is a Dwyer show. It's setting up the same way I said that it could be Payne and Friends. I think that a Dwyer and Friends could happen. I'm a little less confident on it, but it could be the case. Right now, I feel like it's a bunch of guys in that room and not a guy. Last year, you had a guy with Eric McAllister. And Dwyer isn't that type of receiver. He's not that bigger body, right? Like, he's 6'3", 2-something. But at the same time, Jordan Dwyer is 6 foot, a little under 200 pounds. You don't have that crazy, I can go get ball all the way over here, ball all the way over here. I can get it out the frame. There is no catch radius that I can't reach, right? Like, that's the type of guy you had with Eric McAllister because, like I said, he's 6'3". He was, I think you do have some explosiveness with Jordan Dwyer, but you had 6'3", 200-something pounds, big body threat, could be a catch and run threat. You had so many different boxes that were checked by just one player in Eric McAllister. I don't think that you have all those boxes checked by Dwyer, but I also don't think that you have to, right? Like, I think Dwyer is a very talented receiver, and I look at the first 2 weeks of the season to point out what he can do with TCU. It also points out his greatest strength, in my opinion. So against North Carolina, his first game as a Frog, 9 catches, 136 yards, and a touchdown. His second game versus Abilene Christian, 5 catches, 89 yards, and a touchdown. He did have some other games sprinkled in there, such as the Baylor matchup, where he had 7 catches, 111 yards, and a touchdown. He had 11 catches, 108 yards, and a touchdown versus Iowa State. Then he had 3 for 84 and 2 touchdowns. Even I think that was the game where he recovered a fumble in there. I think that's one of the touchdowns. But 3 catches for 84 yards against Cincinnati. Now, oddly enough, it feels like all the big games for him outside of Houston, 3 catches for 25 yards and a touchdown. But all the games where he had touchdowns were his big games. So Cincinnati, 84 yards, only 3 catches. That's a major major yards per catch. He had a 69-yard catch in there as well, his longest of the season. You look at Baylor, 111. You look at Abilene Christian, 89. Cincinnati or North Carolina, 136. Another thing you see is when he does well, they tend to win. Outside of that Iowa State game where he had 11 for 108 and a touchdown, they lost that matchup. But other than that, you're looking at a 10 to win games when Jordan Dwyer does well. I think that has to do with the fact that McAllister's on the other side. But that's the key difference. That's the key difference is what do you do now that Eric McAllister is not there? What do you do now that Eric McAllister is not going to steal all the attention? That's the difference between week 1 and weeks 2 through the end of the season is McAllister stepped up and he rose to the occasion after the first 2 weeks of the year. And then it felt like Jordan Dwyer just kind of went down a little bit. Now, maybe if McAllister doesn't perform as well, you do still get to see Dwyer putting up 80-something yards, 90 yards, get some more 100-yard games. We saw it sprinkled out through the season. I think that Jordan Dwyer gave you really good wide receiver 2 production. It wasn't great wide receiver 2 production, but it was really good wide receiver 2 production. On the days when everybody was extremely focused on Eric McAllister, Jordan Dwyer came in, gave you 100 yards versus North Carolina, had a successful game versus Abilene Christian. Then you sprinkled in some games where people were still paying attention to, you sprinkled in a couple of games where people were still paying attention to Eric McAllister, but then you got loose as well at other times. So this to me is a chance for him to rise up and show when McAllister isn't on the field, what can you do? Because every great game he had, McAllister was there, And I meant to say when McAllister started getting rolling, you sprinkled in some big time games. That's what I meant to say, excuse me. But there is no Eric McAllister to distract anybody. And if I say you're wide receiver 1 potential, that means when you're the main focus of a defense, you can still produce. And I think that he's really talented. I think you see that. I told you that the early 2 games are what show his best strength. Maybe not his best strength, but the one that's going to be the best used for TCU. He knows how to quickly get chemistry. There is no we have to ramp up in. It wasn't with Hoover. I think that with Jaden Craig, you'll probably see another similar run where it's not a ramp up. You have spring ball. You have the ability to practice then. You have the offseason. And that's all that he needed, he being Jordan Dwyer. That's all he needed to find chemistry with Josh Hoover. And if you can find that quickly with a quarterback who's only going to be here for a year, a wide receiver who's only going to be here for a year, right? Like when you have these players who have a limited time together, if they can get rolling quicker, that's going to be significantly better for you. Of course, you want to have all your players get rolling quicker. But if I know that these 2 guys have 2 more years together or have another year together after this season, then I can at least leave hope that if they figure it out at some point in the upcoming year, then they can build forward. I've always talked about the expedited timeline that I believe TCU to be on right now. And Jordan Dwyer and Jaden Craig are they're cemented in that expedited timeline in the sense that they have eligibility to worry about. One thing that I am interested in is how does the receiving game look with Samus at coordinator. Samus is a guy who everybody talks about being a run first, run. But Fagnano actually passed the ball a decent amount, had a really good pass, had a really good receiver, had a really good running back. You had a lot of versatility on that 2025 UConn offense. And I think that gets a little lost. When people talk about Samus, they talk about him running the football as if he doesn't pass the ball, as if it's a complete inverse of what you saw a year ago with Bryles. No, it's going to be a balanced offense. Like I said, you have Fagnano, who is a really good passer. You had Skylar Bell, who was a Biletnikoff finalist. And then you had Cam Edwards, who had 1,200 yards. So you had 3 players who performed extremely well. You had a true triplets at UConn. Now, we'll see what Jaden Craig is able to do. We all know I have the utmost belief in a Jeremy Payne, Now it's about what does Jordan Dwyer do? He doesn't have to be a Biletnikoff finalist. But what he does need to do is give them a guy. Because right now you don't have it. Right now TCU does not have a guy in their receiving core. I think they have a Jordan Dwyer who has the potential to be that. You have a South Alabama transfer in Jeremy Scott, who we got to see what he's able to be. You have some freshmen who are coming up like Dozie, like Small, like Trayton, right? Or Trey, excuse me. Like these are players who, in my opinion, are talented. These are players who are young. These are players who may play a bigger role in next year's offense. But at the same time, you got a collection of guys and you got a guy. Right now, you got the collection. The best offenses, in my opinion, if you don't have to have two, right? Those are the absolute best. But a realistically good offense. A really good offense needs to have a stud wide receiver and then guys behind him where it's not just that guy and some other scrubs, right? Like, think about, obviously, the Cowboys right now have CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. That's ideal. Two great wide receivers. I'm trying to think of somebody who just has one, and then some guys right now. Anyway, you get the point. I can't think of any current examples of teams that only have one stud receiver and then just some guys. But if you have a stud and you have some quality guys around him, that makes a really good wide receiver core. That's why I say Jordan Dwyer has the potential to upgrade, to absolutely elevate and take TCU's wide receiver room out of this room. I didn't really like that, but whatever. Out of this room. You get what I mean? Jordan Dwyer, if he becomes wide receiver 1, now Jeremy Scott just needs to be solid. Not Dozie just needs to be solid. Trey just needs to be solid. Small just needs to be solid. Matter of fact, I would even say all three of those guys don't need to be solid. Give me one or two of them, freshmen who are solid. If Jordan Dwyer is the guy, if he is a bona fide one on your team, 2, 3, and 4 have the ability to have significantly less pressure. That's why I say that he can elevate and take this. I don't want to say out of this world, but he can take the roof off this wide receiver room. Now let's push forward. No more analogies for me. I don't think so. Let's see. What are we talking about next? Yeah, no. I got another comparison on the way. Bowl game season. Bowl games are kind of like playoff games for the NFL when they say that, why do we keep giving division winners with bad records home playoff games? And then eventually one of those guys wins a game and everybody has to shut up. This is that moment for bowl games because it's here. Bowl games were saved in the end of 2025 and beginning of 2026. So let's get into it in the middle of today's episode. Today's episode is brought to you by Rugiet. And listen, fellas, we've all been there and I understand it. Nobody really wants to talk about it, but I will. I'll approach the topic. Sometimes stress from the day carries itself into the bedroom. Sometimes you're thinking about this, thinking about that, and you're not having your head where you want it to be. All right, now listen, Rugiet Ready is a next generation prescription prescription treatment that creates to support both the brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. The science behind Rugiet Ready stands out. 3 clinically proven ingredients in one formula designed for both mental and physical readiness. So most men are ready in about 15 minutes on average. Just a little small mint, put on your tongue, done. Less than a TV show later, you're ready to go. If you've been thinking about taking that next step, now's the time. Head to Rugiet.com/lockedoncollege. That's RUGIET.com/lockedoncollege to get 15% off your order. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Cowboys. They were talking about some good things. I think today's episode was about how much should they spend on Javonte Williams, I believe was today's episode. So make sure you're checking out Locked On Cowboys. Now, bowl games have been a heated discussion for, I would say, a few years at this point. But I think that 2025 and the beginning of 2026 have completely saved bowl games. Now that we're officially over, right? Bowl season is done. We're in playoff season only now. I've been wanting to talk about this pretty much all week, and I didn't want to let the week escape without discussing this topic. It was originally going to be much longer, but TCU and the transfer portal, a lot of things happened. What I'll say, and to put it plainly, is I think that bowl games were on the verge of dying. I believe that bowl games had an expiration date that was coming up soon. Don't know when it was. Nobody knew when it was. But the expiration date on bowl games was pretty rapidly approaching. And then 2025 happened. And the beginning of 2026 can go in that as well. I believe that December 25 and January 26 will go down as the months that saved bowl season. Because as I mentioned, this expiration date that was approaching, I completely understand why people are out on bowl games. People think it's excess. People think that there's no real reason to do it. I get all of those things. I just strongly disagree. And I think that 2025 and 2026 proved it, right? I think that these last 2 months proved that bowl games have value. But I think a lot of people have lost the fun aspect of football. I think as a viewer, you forgot that this is supposed to not only be fun for you, because most people just look at it as entertainment. Most people look at it as competitive, as if they're on the field. Most people don't even look at football these days as fun. Those who talk about it, at least it feels like. You forgot that you're supposed to have fun as a viewer. You forgot the players are supposed to have fun as well. And that's what bowl game represent. I don't care about the outcome of a bowl game, right? Like a win or loss in a Cheez-It Bowl means nothing to me. It means absolutely nothing to me. But what I do care about is the experience, right? In 2025, or just say this bowl season. In this bowl season, we saw trophies that were video games. We saw trophies that were a toaster. We saw people getting, instead of Gatorade baths, having potato baths, having coffee baths, right? Like after winning a game, dump the coffee on them, right? Dump the potatoes on them. That's what we saw in this bowl season. We saw a kid score a touchdown, wrap around, and dive into a pool of inflated Frosted Flakes. These are supposed to be fun moments in a season that's extremely competitive, in a season that's short, in which every game matters. You lose a conference game, that could be the difference between you making the playoffs and be sitting at home, right? Like in all of those moments, we forget that when we get to bowl season, people can just have fun. Everybody's infatuated with this killer mentality, with this ultra competitive mentality that I think sometimes we forget that people are playing a game. Specifically in this situation, kids are playing a game, right? Like these are 19-year-old kids. I got three different ways you could look at it. Bowls matter from a sentimentality. What is that? Right? From a sentimental standpoint, bowl games matter from a observation and evaluation standpoint, and they just matter for fun, right? Like fun should count for something in football. But maybe you're the fun police. Maybe you don't care about the bowl game having the potato bath at the end, having the coffee bath at the end. Maybe you don't care about those things because you're allergic to fun. Football is serious. Football should be about the X's and O's and the 60 minutes of action. We got that too. Because you've had so many opt-outs, and that's been one of the main driving forces that have killed the excitement around bowl games because you don't get to see the top players anymore. They're all opting out. Okay, I get you. But on the other hand, there's also a preseason aspect that has now arrived, that has now risen when it comes to bowl games. Because if my star wide receiver, who I know was going to the draft anyway, has said, I'm not going to play this game, what about the person under him that I know is going to be my wide receiver one? Let's get him in that standpoint. Maybe my quarterback did it, but I know who's going to replace him next year. Let's get him in there and get him some reps, right? Like, let's do all of those things. If you're worried about the X's and O's, if you're worried about the pure football and you don't want to have fun, you're extremely serious, there's still value here. Once again, stop treating bowl games like games that are blowouts in the fourth quarter. That's not what they are. I think if you're going to look at opt-outs happening, and you're going to look at stars no longer being in the game, it's not a blowout in the end of the fourth quarter. It's a preseason game. Because a lot of times this becomes an evaluation for who your team's going to be in 2026 in this case, or whatever the next season may be. Because this clip goes on forever. This is evergreen. You could play this at any moment. TCU, for example, I wanted Jordan Dwyer to have that moment. He ended up not playing, and Eric McAllister did play, ironically. But I wanted to see what Jordan Dwyer could be as a player with no Eric McAllister, not an ineffective, not a unproductive Eric McAllister, but a non-Eric McAllister game. Because just because he wasn't getting points, just because he wasn't getting yards, does not mean that he wasn't effective, right? There was many times he was effective in that North Carolina game. Bowl games matter in that sense. And then from a pure sentimental standpoint, you don't get the Ken Seals moment without bowl games, right? Like that's just, it's rare. It's rare that you get it. What, a playoff game where a guy just says, I don't want to play? Maybe a playoff game where a guy gets hurt, maybe. Maybe a playoff game where a guy just gets benched, Jalen Hurts, maybe. right? Like these things happen. I'm not going to say that they're impossible without a bowl game. But what I will say is that they become much more rare. The opt-outs create a moment to where Ken Seals is able to step in and be a Fort Worth legend off of one game. Like these are things that happen and then from the Alamo Bowl, it had a great story, had a great game, had a great ending, right? With the River walk-off. Like these were just pivotal moments in a matchup that was just good football. Just good football. Maybe that's the last part about it. You don't have to watch the games. You don't have to watch those games. Everybody complaining, just choose not to watch. You know how many bowl games I don't watch? Oh man, it's just too many. For who? For who? Who is it? Who is it too many for? When people say it's too many bowl games, I can guarantee you most of them don't actually care to track all the bowl games. They don't care to do that. So who is it too many for? The commentators calling it? The media having to cover it? You're not doing either. So what are you complaining for? Don't make sense to me. You be complaining about the struggles of others that they're not complaining about. How you get there? What are you upset about? How are you bothered? When it has no kind of derailing to your life. When a bowl game comes on between two teams that I don't care about, you know what I do? I go put on my DVR and I go watch something I have recorded. I didn't watch many bowl games this year. I didn't. What I was able to see is that the fun is here. And that's the problem. There's two things that killed it. One, the opt-outs, and I think a lot of that has to do with the Jalen Smith injury, right? Jalen Smith gets injured. People don't want to go through that. I think you see more and more opt-outs afterwards. And then also the expansion of the college football playoffs also killed bowl season because all of the bowls that people cared about now became playoff games. And we didn't care about the random Cheez-It Bowl or the random black couch bowl, right? I'm just looking at furniture. But like we didn't care about any of that. We didn't care about that. But what we did care about was the Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl, right? Like these are things that we cared about, right? I'm really want to say Alamo Bowl so bad because that's all that's on my brain right now. But the New Year's Six, the Rose Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the whichever one is in Florida, I don't forgot it now. But anyway, I'm catching the brain fart. But the point is, you had all of these major bowls, and those are the ones that we look forward to. Now they don't exist in the grand scheme of bowl season. No one thinks about, oh, you're the Rose Bowl champion. No one says that. No one says that. There is no Sugar Bowl champion. There's just a playoff game that was played in the Sugar Bowl now. Also should fix that. But with 12 games or 12 teams, who really cares if the 15th best team wins the Sugar Bowl? It kind of devalues the Sugar Bowl. So there's that. I'm going to be mad. New Year's 6 bowls. Yes, the orange. I knew I was going to forget. The cotton. How could I forget the Cotton Bowl in Dallas? Fiesta. I would have forgot the Fiesta Bowl. But anyway, the problem is these are the only bowl games that people cared about. Now you have to acknowledge the fun. And I think that 25 reminded us that. When I see players diving in the pool of Frosted Flakes, when I see a freaking huge Cheez-It cake for a Longhorn, right? When I see people getting Gatorade baths, but instead of it being Gatorade in the cooler, it's cut up potatoes. It's coffee. It's a toaster that also is your trophy. Your trophy has a game system because it's the Xbox Bowl game, right? When I see all of these moments, when I hear coaches talking about immersing themselves in cultures of areas that they typically don't go play in, and a lot of these players probably haven't been to, that's what bowl games are about. It's about fun. It's about experiences. I don't care about outcomes, right? And if you do care about the X's and O's, you have the evaluation standpoint of the increased opt-outs, meaning you get a look, a preview of what your next year's team could look like by putting younger players in the game and giving them reps. So if you care about the X's and O's, it provides you that as well. And if you don't like bowl games, don't watch. There's really nothing to complain about because no one's forcing your eyes open and forcing your butt to a couch for you to have to look at it. If it's 2 games that you don't watch, that you don't care about, just don't do it. It's simple. It's simple. Let's push forward, and we'll keep it brief. TCU added 2 edge rushers. I think that was imperative. I think they needed to do it. And I'll break it down a little bit further as we continue with Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, listen, I, for one, love the college football playoffs. The game we saw last night versus Ole Miss in Miami, that was a classic. Ole Miss been having close games all day. Indiana versus Oregon is tonight. NBA action is tonight. As far as the college football playoff goes, to me, you go ahead and hop in on some of the bets on Francisco Mendoza, Dante Moore. You can do it in the middle of the game. You can do it before the game. Does not matter. You can ride with the favorite when you think your team is controlling the matchup, or take a shot on the underdog if you feel an upset is brewing. Build your parlay around the players and the moments that you think will decide the game. Maybe college football playoffs is not your thing. You're a TCU only fan, but you do like some pro ball. NBA Happy Hour has a bunch of different perks that are only available from 5 to 6:30 Central Time. That's it, 5 to 6:30 Central. So you get in on the action at that time, and you'll get some special offers. FanDuel is the best place to get into all of the action all playoff long. So visit FanDuel.com and get your your college football playoff profit boots every game day. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked on Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to close out pretty quickly here on this one. TCU doubled up at edge, and I think we're going to talk about this at another time, which is why I'm not going to go at great depths about it. But you go ahead and got Karan Hayward, and you also got Cheda Ofili. And with Ofili and Hayward, you're also getting players at the edge rush position at a position you desperately needed, right? Like, feel how you want to feel about those 2 players specifically. TCU not only needs bodies, they need impact. And I think that what you got here is potential. Bodies are bodies, right? Bodies. Sorry for my Snowfall fans. I don't think this is. Anyway, you need bodies and you need impact. You're going to have bodies with Hayward and Ofili, right? Like, you're going to have bodies with them. But what you won't know until they get on the field is impact. Because TCU isn't making a lot of splashes. I think Jaden Craig is a solid splash. It's not a big splash. It's a solid splash, right? It's a move that when you look into, you say, oh, it's easy to see the value of a Jaden Craig signing. So it's a miniature splash, right? Like, maybe you just jumped in a little bit. You didn't come in off the diving board, though. These aren't splashes. These aren't splashes at all. Hayward, Ofili, they're not overly productive edge rushers. They didn't come from a G5 level where they were getting up 10, 15 sacks or 10, 12 sacks. And now you're like, will they be able to replicate that? No, they're not overly productive players, but they're younger. They have some years of eligibility, and maybe they just needed a shot, right? Like, Ofili comes in from Texas Tech. Maybe he just needed a shot. Hayward comes in from Western Kentucky. Maybe he just needed a shot. But what I do know is that TCU needs a shot of adrenaline. TCU needs to be able to get to the quarterback. If there was any place that you were going to double up, edge rusher was probably the smartest. I think that wide receiver could have been in that mix. Cornerback should be in that mix. Edge rusher obviously is in that mix, and they deserve to be, because you just didn't do a good enough job getting to the quarterback. I didn't think pass defense was good enough for TCU. And we talk about the difference, or the 2 positions that they need to double up, being cornerback and then also edge rusher. Those 2 things work together. If you can't get no pressure, cornerbacks have to cover forever, and that's just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't work that way, right? Like, that's not effective strategy. And if you can't cover worth of nothing, then you can't get the pass rush there. As far as sacks for TCU, they ranked 10th in the conference with 24 sacks. When you look at who they lost, Caleb Elarms-Orr led the team with 4 sacks. Devin Deal was second at 3.5. And Kylan Jackson, the defensive back, was 2.5, third place at 2.5. Right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you that 2.5 is bad for a DB or 4 is bad for a linebacker. It completely isn't. That's pretty good for their position. The problem is that 4 was the most on the team. The problem is that 2.5 was third on the team. Right? Like, Devin Deal, I like Devin Deal. I think he's a very effective player. I think he was really good at getting pass rush, but I don't feel like I saw a lot more, and I didn't see a ton from him as far as bringing down the quarterback. Excuse me. TCU had a problem rushing the passer, in my opinion. Did they get some pressure? Yeah, it wasn't absolutely horrendous. It wasn't the worst pass rush I've ever seen in my life, but it left a lot to be desired. The cornerbacks left a lot to be desired. You got to fix one of them. You got to fix one of them. I don't care how you do it. You got to fix one. And you got a cornerback that was on campus yesterday. Feels like people be on campus and they sign within a day. So by the time I press schedule or post on here, they'll probably have this guy signed up and wrapped up. But the point is, TCU needs to do something at that pass rush. They didn't have a lot of quarterback hits. Deal is gone. Elarms Orr is gone, right? Like Zach Chapman is a player who is younger, who I think has some potential. But Oyewale, I always looked at him more of a run stopper than a pass rusher. You know, I think that he can be complimentary, but even if you like Oyewale, even if you like Chapman, you need more. You just need guys who are going to move around and who are going to, you need guys who are going to shuffle in as a rotation who are going to be impactful. Because right now, even as Zach Chapman takes off, unless he becomes a David Bailey type of 10, 12, 13 sack player in the regular season, you're probably going to still need some extra help on that pass rush. So the decision to double up at edge rusher, to me, makes the most sense. And then also Hayward, I think, has some flexibility where he can move around, play with his hand, play off the ball, right? He doesn't have to play on ball the entire time. So this is a good call, in my opinion. Just smart decisions. So in the meantime, in between time, we'll be back next week. And I think we're going to take a look at those freshman wide receivers. I kind of teased them in the beginning of the show, but I didn't get into them at depth. I think they have a lot of potential, and I'll get into why probably next week, at the beginning of next week. We'll see, though. Anything can happen over the weekend. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.